Nebraska farmers are expected to produce more than 278 million bushels of soybeans during the 2014 harvest. That total production is estimated to be the 5th highest in the nation after Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, and Indiana. In the latest USDA state report, 70% of Nebraska's crop was rated good to excellent, with 89% listed as setting pods. However, some problems are now arising in fields across the state. UNL Extension plant pathologist Loren Giesler talked with us at a Nebraska Soybean Board-sponsored field day in Auburn last week and said soybean diseases could be causing problems for growers.
We're really in the heat of the stem and root rot season this time of year, and a lot of things going on right now where we see sudden death syndrome, phytophthora stem and root rot in some of those fields that had some heavy rains. We're getting white mold in the northern portion of the state. So brown stem rot also, so a lot out there right now, and now's the real key time to scout those fields and identify them correctly for future management.
Walk me through sudden death syndrome. Where's it at and what should you look for?
Well, all of those are generally going to be pocketed diseases in the field. So SDS, well, a lot of times we'll see that interveinal chlorosis and chlorotic areas in the leaves, usually in the upper portion of the canopy. Those leaves, then that area becomes brown and necrotic, and then those leaves will drop off, and actually that leaf stem or petiole will stay attached. So that'll happen over the course of just a couple weeks many times, and again in pockets. Now the key with that is, though, that can look a lot like brown stem rot. So the foliar symptoms look similar, but that stem injury will look different. So if you pull those plants, SDS plants will usually pull pretty easy. Their tap roots often are rotted off. And then the other thing is take that stem and just take a knife and split it. And if you see brown inside the center of the stem, then you're dealing with brown stem rot versus SDS, which again can look the same from above ground.
SDS, is that long-term then?
Both of these are. Now, another key difference though, variety selection, both of those are going to be key for management, but SDS isn't affected by rotation and brown stem rot is. So things like that are quite different. So that's why it's so important now to get them identified correctly.
Any treatment for brown stem rot?
Same thing, going to be variety selection primarily. That's your biggest thing. So with both of those, seed treatment's not going to be effective for either of them next, when you're doing that seed order. But again, that variety selection. So just make sure you get them identified.
You mentioned white mold. Where are we seeing that at in Nebraska?
Well, white mold, this year we had really cool, wet conditions at flowering. And that is critical. And we had a cool week during the Soybean Management Field Day series. And so again, those cool temperatures are really conducive for that. Now, the good news is, if you don't see white mold in your field, you don't have to worry about it. We're getting a lot of reports from the northern portion of the state, northern half. It could show up, really pretty much in the eastern half of the state, I think, from the weather pattern we had depending on when flowering and that cool temperature worked. Now, we won't see a lot of spread just locally from those points of infection now. So most of the time when we look at management on that, we were looking at foliar fungicide applications early during the blooming stages. So growers that had a history of white mold, hopefully maybe they did some spraying then. Once we get past that, we just see local spread from stem to stem within that canopy. So a lot of times not a good practice to use a fungicide at that point.
If you know you've had it, or if you have it this year, should you do something differently in 2 years in terms of row spacing or anything like that?
Well, row spacing we know has an effect. So narrow rows increases white mold. The problem with white mold in Nebraska is it's normally a problem maybe 1 in 7 to 10 years. We've just had 2 years in a row where we've had cooler climate and where we've had this. So if I had to guess, I would guess the next time it's in beans this won't happen. But every time I've made a guess, I'm usually wrong. So
well, maybe this will be the lucky time, right?
But in any event, variety selection is key on that first. That's going to be your number one. And then go on, if you've got a real strong history of it, then you might look at making that fungicide application earlier in that flowering stage.
And finally, phytophthora, walk me through it.
Phytophthora stem and root rot, pretty easy to identify. Dark discoloration at the base of that plant working its way up. From the outside, you can see that dark discoloration going to be in pockets. This time of year, any of our irrigated producers, if you're looking in wheel tracks, a great place to scout for it. You'll see individual dead plants. If you see dead plants in the field or in wet spots, you probably have some injury in other places in the field. So using that resistant variety is number one, and then the next step is going to be to make sure you got a good seed treatment package on there that's going to have phytophthora control.
On the Market Journal website, we'll link to more information from UNL on identifying and managing these diseases.